All right, so welcome to another podcast this week on for our journey to freedom. And so, again, my name is Brian Arnold, and you can probably obviously see that on the screen here. But I'm just so excited about, I was just telling Johnel, that I just kind of feel that God has His hand in it. As I was recording, a message on the intro and what we need to do, and I would like to, Johnel, I don't know if I told you this, but I'm going to start doing hopefully on Thursday a 7-minute daily message that I'm going to do. It's going to be 7 minutes long. It's going to deal with all these different portions of the podcast, the different pillars, which are identity, trust, finance, health, and faith. And so I want to be able to send that out for 5 days a week, 7 days, for 52 weeks, and really just give people the opportunity to get in. We'll have, I'll probably have an affirmation there. I'll probably have a prayer inside of that. I'll have, some things where some stories are there. You can't do a ton in 7 minutes, but, for somebody to listen to it continually, 7 minutes, if you do, for 5 days, then you're at 35 minutes in a week. You add that for 52 weeks. Now you have some content that, folks that are really wanting to transform who they are. And again, the journey of freedom is about, we say the Calvary's not coming. So it's like we got to be able to help ourselves, but it's still within the communities and creating communities that will allow us to thrive. One of the things that I talked about earlier is, going to an event and having 400 or 500 people there, but only having 25 Black men there. And then watching the communities that take place from the white men with each other and going to dinner and doing all these wonderful things. And it might just be that they're friends. It probably has nothing to do with race, but it just has to do with a community of people that are all going in one direction, that are all thinking like-mindedness, that maybe y'all have, same of this something, the same, hobbies or things like that they want to just hang out with. But the conversations seem to be different than those that I've experienced in some of the communities I'm with, where it's talking about the future and where do we go and how do we get there? And not just so much talking about how it used to be, how we grew up. Remember when we played baseball on the street with the stick and we all got skinned up? That's a great conversation and it's fun to have and important to have. But what about, this is what we're going to do next year? This is where we're going to find value. I was at a meeting last week in Phoenix, and the gentleman that I was kind of like a mastermind circle. And we talked about benchmarks. We talked about what are the benchmarks that you have for your future in your life. And it was the whole conversation had nothing to do with the past. It was all, if you get to go to retirement, and that was the kind of the question in there for benchmark number one, how much do you need to live comfortably?
Right.
And then, because he said, I want to reverse engineer it to what you got to do to be able to do that. So he said for, $1 million, that for every $1 million that you have saved up, that'll spin off about $50,000 a year in interest. And then your $1 million doesn't depreciate and continues to grow. And so he goes, so if you want to live on $50,000 a year, then you need to have $1 million in the bank. What's your number? And I'm like, I need at least 6 million. That's 300,000.
Right.
Okay. And then the conversation went to, how are you going to get there? And so these are some things that you can do, but it was a community of people. It wasn't just him that was saying it. There were 12 of us in a room, and we all begin on each other's thing to say, okay, this is how old you are. He pulled out, it was unique. And I know, we'll talk about some of this, but he pulled out a tape measure and he went, I was thinking if I had one in the drawer right here. He pulled out, maybe I do, because it was a really good illustration that helps. I do have one. Good. So he pulled out, whoops, I'll just stand that. Well, I should probably sit down so you can see my face. And Johnel, you can kind of attest to this. So he pulls out this tape measure, pulling it out like, I can't see because of my background. But he pulls it out all the way to age 70 or 75 inches. And that represented the age that that people die, and I was looking at like Black men and saying, okay, what is the age that Black men are dying? And it's lower than the 75 national average. It's more like 70.
Yeah.
And then he goes, okay, so he had me hold it at the 0, And then he went to, I'm 59. He went to 59 and he told me to grab it at 59. So I grabbed it at 59. And then you're 40, so you can think of, at 40 year old what that is. And then you pulled it out to that 72, and you can barely see it, but this is how much left I got.
Mm.
What am I going to do to be able to make a difference with a space that's like this big?
Right. Wow.
Compared to
Wow.
the whole thing there, and say, like, this whole life you've already done what you're going to do. You've already, that whatever's happened there, whatever was good, whatever was bad, has happened.
Yeah.
So now you have, in my case, if it's 72 and I'm 58, I have 12, 14 years. Now I think I'm going to live to 100. So I have, my mind, I have more years.
Amen to that.
But
Amen to that.
but if I look at what that is, that's not very much more time.
Right.
What am I going to do differently in who I am as a person, in my identity? How do I trust the right people to get where I want to be? What am I going to do with my finances to make sure I'm at least, that first benchmark is 6 million. So I had a second benchmark and even a third benchmark. And the third benchmark was if you had stupid money, like you're going to ski behind an aircraft carrier, water ski behind an aircraft carrier. Like, I've never seen a black man even close to their thinking about skiing behind an aircraft carrier. Very rarely do I see him out there skiing behind a boat.
Right.
But at the same time, what are those dreams? What are those goals? What are those things we want? And so thank you guys for being on. I have Johnell Moody on today, and we're really going to talk a lot about the health industry and what we need to do to be healthy. And the reason I brought up some of, how long I have to live is based on, some statistics that just say that, black men in particular don't, the one I was reading just said, has all these issues with their health and the things that go on with their health, and whether it's high blood pressure or diabetes or, heart disease, that kind of stuff. And what's the deal with our diets and the way we eat. But a big part of what I think shortens life is stress.
Mm-hmm.
And stress and what goes into how stress interacts with your bloodstream, with the chemicals in your body, all that kind of stuff. So before we jump into that, Johnel, if you could just maybe introduce yourself. Where did you grow up? What are you doing now? What are some things that you can say? Because I know you're an expert in this field. So maybe some of the background that would, just help us kind of understand where we're going.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I remember us sitting and eating some tacos, and as you were introducing the idea of J2F, and we were talking about how profoundly it is needed in the Black community. There is this term that I learned when I was probably about 10 years old with an organization that I was privileged to be a part of, in terms of mentorship, called Full Circle Intergenerational Project, and they introduced this term called Harambe.
Harambe. Okay.
Harambe is a Swahili term, and what that means is us all pulling together. And so, as you were talking about J2F,
Mm-hmm.
the word Harambe entered into my spirit, and I said, "Hey, that's what we need. We need all of us to be pulling together, to have a chance
Mm-hmm.
at thriving in this life, not just surviving." So I want to say that.
Thank
But
you. I
yeah,
love that. You're going to remember
absolutely.
Harambe. I'll write that up here. That's so cool. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. But yes, as Brian said, my name is Johnell Moody. I am born and raised in the Great Mile High City of Denver, Colorado. More specific, I grew up in the Five Points community, which is known as the Harlem of the West. The Five Points was the epicenter for Black enterprise, Black business, Black residential. It was Black everything, right? It's a beautiful community, and it still is, even though it's not predominantly Black owned anymore, and there's a lot of gentrification happening. But that's where I grew up. Um, and growing up in the Five Points is some of the most formidable years that I've had, of growth and development. But it was also some of the most challenging years, because, like most Black communities, we weren't any less susceptible to drugs, gang violence, and as well as racial oppression, growing up in that community. But it shaped me, it molded me into the man that I am today. And so today I get the privilege of doing ministry full time in the community that I grew up in, particularly in the city that I love so much. through a mission called Young Life. Young Life is a global Christian youth outreach organization, over 105 countries across the globe, every major city throughout the US. And I serve as the Associate Regional Director overseeing our Denver Metro Initiative, Youth Outreach Initiative through Young Life. Been a part of Young Life for a little over 6 years. And it's just a privilege to be able to do youth development in a context where Jesus is first. Um,
Mhm.
when I first got into youth work, it was over 20 years ago. I was in high school, and a friend of mine introduced me to an organization called Youth Biz when I was a freshman. And Youth Biz was an organization that was building leadership capacity in youth in the Five Points Cold Whittier neighborhood through leadership development, teaching kids how to network, teaching kids really what it means to be a leader in community development. Now, it wasn't a faith based organization, but it was really an organization where I first learned to lead, um, and I was a leader of my peers. And
Mhm.
so I was leading high school youth while being in high school. I was a
Oh, wow.
junior
Okay.
leading freshmen on how to become leaders and
Mhm.
things of that nature. So I really started to hone in on the skills when I was in high school, and it's been a part of me ever since. And I've been doing youth development in various capacities, whether I was coaching basketball or football, uh, doing volunteering my time, and then most recently within the last 10 years doing full-time ministry. So that's what I do. Have an amazing family of five. Been married for 16 years, three amazing kids, a 14-year-old right now who is a freshman at Vista Peak High School. His name is LJ. Is Johnel Jr., but we call him LJ, Little Johnel. We have Jaden, which is my middle child, and Joy. They both go to a public charter out here in the Green Valley area. So yeah, family is a big part of what I love to be involved in, and on a day to day outside of ministry. That's my safe place. And
Okay.
then outside of that, just love to learn and try to stay active and healthy as possible.
I hear you. Well, thank you
Yeah,
for thank you for introducing yourself and this whole world that we grow up in. And
yeah,
I know you said that you grew up in the Five Points area, which is, like you said, was predominantly black. You've been a part of being able to, through ministry and through other things where you've, had the exposure to what we believe that black culture is,
yeah.
and then maybe some of the obstacles, or like
Hmm.
we've heard all these stories. We didn't live. I've lived a little bit longer, you, but not much. I wasn't around when Martin Luther King Jr. was around. I was,
Right, right,
he
right.
died the year I was born. um, and we've grown up with these stories from our
Hmm.
from our elders. How have those stories shaped maybe the person that you are, and the person that you want to become, based on maybe some of those dreams, some of those things, some of those things that our elders have said, well, you need to do this and this and this.
Yeah,
How is that shaped who you are?
yeah. I am, and what I would call myself. This is probably a made up term, but I would say an elder connoisseur,
Okay.
meaning I love to sit at the feet of elders to learn from their experiences, learn wisdom, and learn from their mistakes, right? And I think that's what elders give us. They give us an opportunity to learn from their experiences so that way we don't repeat them, right? We become better. And so there's an old saying that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And that's exactly how I view eldership. And the way that it has shaped my journey is through responsibility, right? When you understand, when you're
Hmm.
having significant conversations with elders, my elders were, they were in the streets or they were in the
Hmm.
church, right? But all had meaningful experiences, things to share with me whenever I had questions. And it was just this responsibility that I felt that me as a black man to create a pathway for success, and not the success just for myself, but a success where there is an open doorway that I'm working to create that others can walk through, not a doorway that I open and then I shut behind me. And I
Hmm.
think that is the principles of the elders, is that we're creating spaces and opportunities so then that way others can walk through those opportunities and have even more greater success than you. And I think that helps to continue this success narrative, particularly in the black community and around black men. And so the elder voice in our community is so important, and I would say is missing in
Hmm.
today's generation. We are losing the vibrancy and as well as the leadership and the wills the wisdom of our elders, and we desperately need that back in our communities.
Wow. So one of the things that was super prevalent, for me, and just the noticeability is the lack of the um, black man in the family. And
Hmm.
I think systematically, through Lyndon B. Johnson's, initiatives that pulling black men out of homes, you are a black man that is in the home,
Hmm.
and you are raising your kids with you and your wife.
Yeah.
How do you think that viewpoint, or you as an example, as a leader, shines on other young black men being able to see that?
Yeah, I didn't grow up with a father in the home, unfortunately. I grew up in a single parent household with a mother of two boys. And you can imagine the hardship for my mother trying to raise two boys into men, right? If that's any a thing that is a responsibility of a single mother, which is not. And so I know firsthand how it feels to walk in a world where you're trying to learn to be a man and you don't have a man to ask those questions, right? Whether it's, hey, how do I change the oil in a vehicle, or how do I handle specific circumstances in my life that only a man would actually journey through, specifically only a black man would journey through.
Hmm.
And so for me to be present in the home, not just physically, but emotionally, and really intricately connected in the day to day activities of each one of my children's life and involved in even the affairs of my wife, man, is so important because I know what it feels like, right?
Hmm.
To go without a male voice, a black male voice in the home. And I never wanted my kids to experience that type of hurt, that type of confusion and disillusionment, right? Because
Hmm.
when there's no black male in the home, it creates this confusion around, one, am I was I not worthy enough for my father to be around? The what ifs,
Hmm.
um, and then at the same time, then you're working with pain of feeling abandoned, and then anger of feeling abandoned at the same time, and then having to wrestle with all that emotion. And I knew for a fact, man, that when I had a family, my kids would never experience that, no matter what. I will be present. And then for young men being in youth development, particularly youth development in under-resourced communities, to be not to take the role of a father that's absentee in the home, but to be a present and trustworthy male figure in their life that they can at least go to get those questions answered, to have that type of support and guidance and accountability. Let's just be real, and
Hmm.
accountability.
Hmm.
Because I think the black male voice provides a lot of accountability and instructional guidance that can deter a lot of bad decision making that can lead to some realities that we don't want.
Absolutely. When we think about identity, and I definitely want to jump into health pretty quick here, but that all intersects with each other.
Yeah.
I was looking up, just some of um, the journey of the black man, in our past, some of the things, the significant challenges or adversity that is shaped by, systems or social things that go on. We can go as far as back as slavery,
Hmm.
and what it meant to be demoralized as a man.
Yeah.
That, especially if that person came from, I know several were born here at some point and didn't get to experience, but if you were a black man that was pulled out of your
Hmm.
home as a leader in Africa,
Yeah.
and then to have another man do what they did, how that works. And then we have like the Jim Crow era. I fast forward away, pretty far, after the abolition of slavery, and then they faced just the discrimination and segregation that went on,
Yeah.
where they were said, yes, you are a man, but not really.
Mm.
And then the economic disparities that persist, that often not being able to have jobs, and not being put into in many project housing areas where jobs weren't available, and then when jobs were, moving them so far that they couldn't get to jobs. And then our criminal justice system in the
Yeah.
80s, where there was this war on, how many people can we incarcerate? Then we move into this racial profiling,
Yeah.
because I show up and New York had, you would just have to stop and freeze, and they could continue to do that kind of stuff, or search you and that kind of stuff. Then the health disparities. You think of the experimentation that was done, like the
Yeah.
Tuskegee Airmen and that kind of stuff, and then educational equities. The
Yeah.
historically black colleges weren't available to every black male that was there, or if they were in other schools and they weren't an athlete, how did they get through? And then just the stereotypes and stigmatization that has come from that. So that has shaped the identity of a
Mm.
black man, and,
Mm.
and who we are and what we're told to do. The conversations that we have with our sons about police and getting pulled over, and as my sons experience that, and my conversation is just don't do anything stupid, but still be you. But then that's still part of their identity, right? Because
Yeah.
why should they even have to have that thought in their mind to be able to do stuff? So when you think about identity, what are some of the things that you believed helped you get through that? Get
Yeah.
through all those things that are part of that journey. Because when we look at your life, and it's not the exact life that you want, and you want it to be better and everything like
Yeah.
that. But when you match yourself up against so many of our incarcerated brothers, and so many of our brothers who hang out in the streets, or so many of our brothers who can't figure out how to lead their families, or how do you, other obviously we know it's God, but
Yeah.
beyond that, please just kind of give me some thought process on that.
Yeah. Everything you just described would point towards this. There is no male on earth that has the plight of a black man. None. It's incomparable. And in addition to what you just described, the thing that I'm thinking about the most is we have experienced historical, generational, complex, and compound trauma.
Hmm.
And what that simply means is that the trauma of our ancestors exists in our DNA today, in our bloodstreams, meaning that we carry the weight, the stress of our ancestors in our DNA. And we're forced to reckon with the question, well, what are we supposed to do with that type of stress? How do we reckon
Mhm.
with it? Because if we don't learn to deal with it, then inevitably it will actually deal with us, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so for me, I think one of the biggest things that became very important in my life is healing.
Okay.
Healing became an important component, right? My experience with that level of oppression had to do with police brutality, obviously, education and justice, and as well amongst other things from my experiences growing up as a black child, as a black man, and then having to kind of repeat some of those things that were repeated to me, to my children, my two black sons and my daughter, around affirming the beauty of their blackness, and the brilliance and excellence of their blackness. Then at the same time, having to have conversations about cautioning them about
Mhm.
what it means to be black, right? Like an interaction with the police, right? As we have seen over the years, I have my 14-year-old saying, "Hey, I don't feel safe around law enforcement."
Mhm.
um, and being able to have those hard and vulnerable conversations about my experience with law enforcement and some of the do's and don'ts, right? Just to preserve your life if you were ever having an interaction with a law enforcement official. To affirm the blackness of my daughter and her black hair and the beauty of how she wears it, when we're in the age where young black girls and young black men are being suspended for school because of their hairstyle, meaning that I can't get educated because there's a person who has a racial bias and a racial issue against how God has naturally developed my hair,
Mhm.
right? And how I can wear it, and those things are just so horrifying. And so for me, it's really just dealing with, um, how do I deal with the emotions of it? right?
Mhm.
And how do I not allow how I feel about it emotionally undermine my influence as a leader, as a
Mhm.
father, as a husband, and ultimately as a black male in Denver, Colorado, in this society as a whole, right? um, and that's really so it doesn't take me out. And so what I feel, the thing that I've been more drawn to is really this thing called emotional intelligence, right?
Okay.
As a part of health in my personal life. And emotional intelligence to me is a superpower, right?
Okay.
And in definition of it is really perceiving and understanding your own emotions and the emotions of others in real time, what you're feeling, and how to regulate that in the moment, not reflective, but in the moment. And I began to work through that. But in order to work through emotions, you got to be able to feel them first. You
Mhm.
can't heal what you can't feel. And so I had to journey into all of the hardness that I've been putting underneath the rug because I didn't know how to deal with all these emotions from growing up in a single parent home, growing up through racial oppression and all the different things, and burying those things because as Black men, we're told not to feel, right?
Mhm.
We're told that we have to be strong and we have to be resilient and we have to be all these big masculine things, and in the end, we're dying inside because we don't know what to deal with all these hard emotions, especially when they come at us very fast and very hard. And so we have to sit at the end of the day to wrestle with these things, which becomes torment. And so I began the journey through emotional intelligence as a pathway towards healing and a pathway towards stress reduction in my personal life, that I believe is creating some really good strides, not just in my life, but to be able to teach that to other men too.
Gotcha. So I know that we're talking about emotional intelligence, and when I go to intelligence, I think of the IQ test or how
Yeah,
smart I am,
yeah.
or how my ability to at least be able to trick somebody to think that I'm smarter than I am.
Hmm.
In many cases, when it comes to emotional intelligence, are there folks that is it like the higher the score that you can get, the better you are at dealing with emotions, or is it just I think and feel in different ways, and I need to feed the things like I think of like the strengths or the love languages or something like that, where you like to be communicated in one way. How does emotional intelligence work? What am I trying to find out here?
Yeah. Emotional intelligence. There is an assessment that people can take to really kind of figure out, like, hey, where do you lie within the spectrum of emotional intelligence? It's measured in four different building blocks: self awareness, self management, social awareness, and relationship management. Which are the four pillars of emotional intelligence. And all of that is asking yourself these questions: How self aware am I? In those four different pillars, right? When it talks about self awareness, if I am having a hard day at work, am I able to identify what I feel in real time while I'm having that hard day at work? And then being able to strategize how I'm going to respond, not react to those
Mm,
feelings, right?
yeah.
Because it's all about recognizing what your tendencies are in each one of those pillars. Now we can go into all the science of it. I don't think we have a lot of time for that, but there are some subcategories that goes into each one of those. And one of those things is empathy, right? Right? Do I have enough empathy for myself and my experience? And am I aware of that? And do I have empathy for others when they're going through their experiences, and things of that nature? And that's a part of a self awareness piece. And then am I able to manage, right, those feelings as they come and as they go, and not even be judgmental of it, but be curious, right? Because the curiosity helps us become a student of ourselves and what we feel. And then as we're able to continue to develop um, the muscle around self awareness, we get better at really controlling ourselves versus allowing our emotions to control us.
Wow. So is it possible in within the emotional intelligence world that, I guess we're striving to be somewhat balanced in our reactions and not, lashing out and the things that,
Yeah.
I think we think of the negative things, but then on the happiness side, can you have too much happiness? Can you have too much,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, is there a way to get better at it? I mean, is it just by
Yeah.
awareness, or what are some things that people do so that the negative, just, clumping, I guess, I don't even know what the word is to say it, just doesn't overwhelm a person and freeze them into inactivity or inability to move on?
Yeah, it's a skill that can be developed. It takes a lot of practice. One practice of developing emotional intelligence, and maybe this is a stigma in our community, but it's journaling,
Okay.
right? It's reflection. Um, am I able to reflect on my day and pinpoint, hey, where I may have been reactive or where I may have been responsive, right? And it just takes 15 minutes, right? Just to reflect over your day and ask yourself some really simple questions, right? And then ask yourself, hey, how am I going to prove tomorrow? What is one thing that I can do tomorrow that makes me 1% better, right? And so just the simple act of journaling helps to build our emotional intelligence. Also, this, um, you know, one of the single greatest indicator if you're growing in emotional health, in emotional intelligence and emotional health, is through accountability. Right? You have
Mm.
somebody who is observing you and is being able to communicate with you what it's like to be on the other side of you.
Oh, wow. That's
Right?
deep right there. The other side of you.
The
Okay.
other side of you. And so it goes like this. If I were to follow Brian Arnold for an entire day, now he didn't even know this camera was on him, but I'm following him with the camera. And then at the end of that day, right, 9 o'clock hour comes, and I'm saying, "Hey, Brian, hey, here's a videotape of your day," right? Then you'll get like a first hand view of like all of your tendencies, good, bad, or indifferent, how you communicate, how you respond, how you react, and then you will be able to take that as a case study and say, you know what, here are some areas that I know that tomorrow I'm going to be better in, right? And so sometimes you just need that person to at least be an observer of your how you show up every day, and to be able to say, hey, this is where you can improve. And so those are two simple practices, real tangible practices that a person can institute in their life to develop that emotional health and the emotional intelligence piece, that just helps them that much more better in their life.
Man, well, I've been on this planet for 59 years, almost 59 years. And you're the first like black man who's ever told me to journal. I mean,
Mm,
that's just, and that it can be helpful. It is not part of, if it is part of our culture, it's not something that we talk about.
yeah, we don't, right?
It's,
It's one of those things where it's like, journal what?
journal what?
I,
I'm gonna
I
write
I
down
remember.
what?
Listen, I remember when a person first told me, "Hey, you should journal," and and she talked about like, "Hey, Dr. King journal." And I was like, that wasn't a great motivator,
Yeah.
And I love and I respect Dr. King, right?
Yeah.
It was, but it was more or less like, man, that sounds like an experience that I just don't think I can rock with. But then when I started doing it, and then you go back and you read what you're writing, and then you look at it and you can say, dang, I came a long way. The things that I was writing about and that I was doing, I don't do no more. And if they do show up, I can identify them very quickly and respond differently with a different strategy. Because again, it's all about intentionality,
Mhm.
and it's all about not undermining our influence, right? Because every time we undermine our influence, we self-sabotage ourselves. And when we self-sabotage ourselves, we are causing unnecessary stress in our lives, right? We have enough, Brian. You went through the whole list. We
Yeah.
have enough. We have enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's this term, I didn't invent this term, but a good friend of mine did, and it's saying suffer less.
Suffer less. I
Yeah.
love it.
So how do we suffer less? By showing up really intentional every single day in the areas in which we have influence.
Yeah, if there was only a program that would help you have the accountability for journaling and help you learn how to journal and be
Yeah.
intentional, and that's why that's exactly why we're doing this. And I think of when I go to our pillar of trust. So it's, again, we talk about identity, trust, faith, finances, and health. And when I talk about the trust side, really thinking about how do we trust ourselves, because it's going to be really hard to trust anybody else
Yep.
if we don't trust the man that I am. Like, do I trust myself when we talk about emotional intelligence?
Yep.
That when that person cuts me off on the side of the road, or that person calls me a name that, that you hear it coming from a kid, knowing that the kid has no clue what they're saying,
Yep.
but the parent said that, and the anger that comes, how do I get to that point where I'm trusting myself to make those great decisions on a daily basis? Because we make decisions all day long, every day, but they're all based on our experiences, right?
Yep.
And things we have. So how do we get to that point where we have enough of the great experiences and we have enough of belief in ourselves that we can begin to trust ourselves?
That's a really good question. I would say it starts with your core, right?
Okay.
Brian, you are very active in your own health, and I think in any regardless of sport, exercise, or just general health, man, you'll always hear a personal trainer say how important it is to develop the stability of your core, right? Your core makes a difference in how your posture is and your back and all these different things, right? Your core is central to your overall health development. Well, that's the same thing when it comes down to trusting yourself. It's really developing your core, and your core is made up of your IQ, right? That's your skills and your ability to learn. Your EQ, again, which is the emotional intelligence piece, and that's being self-aware around the emotions of others, and then PQ, your personality, right? And so, as you continue to grow and develop strengths in your self awareness about how you are hardwired, right? And that comes through, your nature, your nurtured, and your choices that you make, how you're hardwired, right? And then being able to understand how you perceive and process emotions, and again responding to those things, not reacting to those things, and then begin to understand your IQ, your skills, the things that you bring to bear to meet the needs, right? Whether the needs of yourself, needs of your family, or if you're in an organization, meet the needs of the organizations, the skills that you bring to bear. As you develop and strengthen that core, then you begin to trust who you are and your contribution in this world. And then when you're trusting who you are, right, then you're able to start art giving other people the benefit of the doubt, right? Because you understand yourself. And then, you become very good at understanding others, learning how to understand others. And so it's really these things that I like to say, know yourself to lead yourself.
Mm.
And then after you know yourself to lead yourself, which has everything to do with knowing your tendencies, your actions, consequences of your actions, and what reality that produces, then you're moving into the next thing, know others to lead others.
Wow, that's so good. One of the things that you brought up, and you said, we know who we are, and know yourself to lead yourself. But then you brought up a word, contribution, so
Yes.
that you'll be able to contribute.
Yeah.
Is it a part of the culture that we are born to contribute? I mean, I know God's given us that, and we are to contribute, and we are to help. Do we believe that we're good enough to contribute in a positive way to the society? Is that one of the issues as Black men that we go through? Is I want to contribute, so I'll go. In many cases, I'll go. Maybe coach a young sports team. That'll be my contribution. And I hear people talk, and you work with youth as well, in doing it at a higher level. But how do we contribute to each other? In ways that, because we continue to grow older, and we
Yeah.
say we want to impart whatever that knowledge is. But
Yep.
if our knowledge is skewed,
Yep.
or our experiences aren't some of those that are positive or rewarding, or
Yep.
not everybody could become a gang member and then get out and then change the world,
Yep.
right? The
Yep.
whole lot of people that were gang members that in their older age are still gang
Yeah.
members,
Yep.
or
Yep.
that
Yep.
mentality, right? So
Hmm.
how do we get to the point where we believe that our worthness is in contributing, not just to folks coming up, but to each other?
Yeah, I think innately we as black men, we want to contribute, and I think we do.
Hmm.
Now, the biggest thing here is, are we contributing in a right way that keeps us progressive and continue to grow, right?
Mm.
And that's, are we contributing in the right and productive areas, right? And so, I have a saying, I coach basketball, and I tell my son this. I say, you do not want to practice bad habits, right? Because then you just became good at doing something wrong
Yeah.
over time. Michael Jordan said that, right? If I shoot 100 free throws with bad form, then I just got really good at shooting bad free throws. And
Mm.
so I think what we want to start reshaping in our culture is good form and good practice. And so, what are the good things that we need to be contributing that would allow us to knock down 100 free throws in our communities?
Oh, I love that. 100 free throws in our communities. I'm gonna write that down as a goal. Yeah, I love that. And when I think about what you're saying, and I see we do so many things, and we say, I keep failing at this.
Mm,
I'm not good at this. Um, but if I just do it 20 more times, somehow all of a sudden I'll be good at it, right? But you're just doing it. You're doing it wrong. And I'll just use a financial example, right?
mhm,
I get my paycheck in, and then these are the things I do the day that I get my paycheck. I go buy,
mhm,
whatever it is that to get ready for my weekend, get ready to watch my friends or the people that I, admire participate. And on
mhm.
the other end, I don't have any additional money to invest in myself or invest
Yeah,
in my family or to create a retirement because I'm spending all my money over here. And then
yeah,
we say, well, if I just do this every week, eventually I'll have enough money where I can start putting this stuff away and it other habits. So how do we just make sure that you said doing the right things and the right practices,
yeah,
you know, is there a way to find out what those holes are that, being, I guess, open to hearing it, because it's
yeah,
usually somebody else who has to bring it to our attention on one side of it, and then on the other side of it, me being willing to tell my fellow brother that, hey, you're falling down in this area.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it takes a lot of humility,
Mhm.
radical humility,
Okay.
in our communities to know that, hey, we're practicing the wrong form. And that wrong form, unfortunately, is not allowing us to win the game at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Um, Form follows function, right?
Hmm.
And so, if our function is off, then the form is all off. And so we have to make sure that we're keenly aware and listening to those who have developed a proper form and be able to get in the gym and practice that form. But it takes a lot of humility, right? And humility again goes back to that self-awareness piece, that I don't know what I don't know.
Hmm.
And God has placed people in my life who want to help me to discover new ways of thinking, new paradigms. Because again, right, you can't, the definition of insanity, right, is thinking you're going to get different results by doing the same thing, right? Or I'll take it a layer deeper, is you can't solve new problems with old ways of thinking.
Wow.
And
That's
so
there you
we
go.
need we need new ways of thinking and shaping around ideas that is going to give us long-term sustainable successful results as black men. And then now we're able to create a new generational habit that we can pass down to the younger generation and say, hey, this is the blueprint for success, because we've seen it, we tested it, and it's tried and true, right? And we'll be able to hold true to these values, these standards, these principles, and these practices that we can pass on from here on out,
Mm.
right? Like an oral
Yeah.
tradition in the black community, right? Oral tradition is so important in our community, that in the old, in the times, before slavery, they would force the younger generation to sit down before the elders and learn verbatim history
Hmm.
and right practices, right? So then that way they can do the same thing with the next generation, right? And that's super important, right? Because That's what keeps generations alive, is understanding right traditions, right behaviors, the things that allowed us to be able to sustain a healthy culture over time. And I think that's what we have to do in the Black community
Mhm.
today.
Oh, absolutely. And when I think about what you're saying, and having to sit down and having to listen, and I think about associations, right? And
Hmm.
I learned, probably in my 20s, that who you become is directly related to what you're putting into your mind on a
Hmm.
monthly, weekly, daily process, and then who you hang around with.
Yeah.
We are like the top 5 people that are in our inner circle, in our sphere.
Yeah.
We're probably more similar.
Yep.
How do we, in that vein, in trying to create those associations, how do we make sure, or how do we create community groups or community awareness where we can create associations? Because it's so easy to to take on, oh, I'm just, I'm going to show up at a meeting and hope somebody else shows up, and then our association will be fine. And I think I get the organic side of it.
Hmm.
And we just, we find people that are like-minded in areas that we tend to frequent. How are we going to be intentional about finding those associations that are going to move us forward?
Yeah, great question. I think you have to look at outcomes. Not that any person or any institution controls outcomes, but if they are operating with the right controllables, then the likelihood of outcomes being reached are more positive, right? And so we have to look at those associations and say, hey, can we be a part of something that is going to help us produce the right outcomes for our community?
I love that. Yeah.
Does it exist? And if it doesn't exist, how do we create that table, right?
Yeah.
And then invite people to the party. And the biggest thing here, when you have those right outcomes, Brian, you talked about this. You said you become who you're associated with and what you're actually putting in your mind. You can't be afraid to be around people who are better than you.
Mm, I love that. I love that. In
You
fact, you
know,
need to seek out people, right, that are better
all the
than you.
time, all the time, all the time. That's why I said I like to sit at the feet of the elders. They're better than me when it comes down to the experience
Mhm.
in certain areas of my life, right, where I just need to grow. And so I have to place my time, with people like yourself who understand how to build and sustain wealth, right? How to get from A to B when it comes down to certain areas in my life as a Black man. And so we have to not be intimidated by putting ourselves in a place to be around people who are better than us. And then we have to, again, have radical humility to be able to listen to what they have to say and practice the things that they did to get there. And
Oh
so
man,
those are the right outcomes. We have to find
yeah,
those associations that have those outcomes. If they don't exist, then we have to build it.
yeah, and there's so much pride in our community, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have pride, but
Mhm.
it's a how do I seek out? Reminds me of the verse, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," right? Philippians
Yeah.
4:13. But it says through Christ who strengthens me, and then I think, okay, if I take that verse a little bit further, how is Christ going to strengthen me? Right? Is it through me just doing my own stuff, or he uses people, right? Because last time I checked, Christ hasn't came and just told me stuff in my other than to start this program, right? I felt that loudly, but on a day-to-day basis, the people that are Christ-like, the people that I
Yeah.
admire, the people that I want to emulate, are people,
Absolutely.
and so when I think about that, I can do all things. That means I can be better
Hmm.
through the people that I choose to associate with, and
Absolutely.
not to try to do it. I mean, there's so many, young folks now that are, let's say they're in the early 20s, that for whatever reason have these, maybe the same ones we had, that have these chips on our shoulders about the society that we're in and the things that we got. And sometimes I think some of our organizations that we have just feed the fire of that,
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
not giving solutions, right? They're giving just more of, this is what happened. This is why you should be angry. This is why
Hmm.
you know watching the silly show is Highway to Heaven from 19, they did a thing on racism. It was just terrible. It was like, they had this militant young black man that was trying to grow up, and he ends up getting shot by the police. And it was a mess, but it made me think, have we come much further since then, since the 1970s and 80s, with how we raise our folks to think differently, to improve, to take on, like you said, where do we have space now where you can sit at the feet of elders? It used to be in church and you're there, but where's that space at?
Honestly, I don't know if the elders table exists anymore in today. And I'm just being honored about that. I don't think it exists today. I had to find that in bits and pieces, right? And then go have one-on-ones. And what you're talking about here is, how do we build community again, where the elders' voice is being revered and respected, listened to, and applied.
Ooh, and applied.
And applied. When you think about the life of Christ, right? You use the term, I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me. When you think about the life of Christ, he was intentional about building community, right? Now we're talking about the God of the universe, who became flesh, right? He didn't need no help. He didn't need no community. He was already in perfect community.
Yes.
Right? He didn't need no help.
Yes.
And he came down and was intentional about building community, with what we know now here as the 12 disciples. One fell off, unfortunately. But he was really intentional about building community with those men, right? And they recognized that this is, the eternal elder voice that we're going to listen to, respect, revere, and apply, right? And so how do we just reciprocate what Jesus did? Right? Be really intentional about building community where those things can take place.
Yeah. I mean, he took a small group of men, and I'm sure there was some influence from ladies that were part of the group, and he changed the world forever. With 12 groups. So why are we trying to do it differently? Why are we trying to figure it out? Like
the model is there, the blueprint is there. We were never meant to journey this life alone. We were never meant to figure things out in isolation. It was always meant to be in community.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. And then taking that community and then duplicating, because that's what he did, right? I mean, all 12 of those disciples went out and they did their thing, and think we do the same thing. And if we're going to change the trajectory of, the African American or the black man, that's, and I want to say, this is a African American, core that we're trying to reach. I mean, I know there are folks that are black that come from other countries that, maybe had a different, like a lot of the Africans, I just enjoy talking to, I had roommates that were from Nigeria when I was in college, but their belief in themselves, their belief in their heritage, their belief in their culture, their belief in what is right, their belief in hierarchies, their belief in is so much stronger than what ours is. And it's hard to say, okay, I've taken these people that have had these issues or all the things that I talked about earlier, and how do I move that group forward? How do we create community and then invite everybody else? Right. Because I think we have to be strong within ourselves before we can then go change the world and bring everybody else in. I mean, in all 5 of these areas, there's got to be this ability for us to, take that, like you said, the trauma of what's there. Dang, we're already running out of time, but maybe in a couple, minutes, what are some things that we can do trauma wise? You talked about emotional EQ. But is there something we can do to just minimize how we react to stuff? Like maybe 1 or 2 things that, whether it's meditation or whether it's prayer or something that we can begin that practice of?
Yeah, I mean, there were 2 books. There's a lot of books that I read, but I think there's 2 books that were formable in me getting started on my emotional intelligence journey. There was one book that was written by a white man. His name is Bob Bill, and it's called "Why Do You Do What You Do?" And it's really a workbook to help you understand, like during your childhood, where was shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken as a child. Where did that break for you? And then how did that create this dominant emotional need that you begin to see the world through and try to reach, right? And so if your dominant emotional need had to do with being affirmed, then whether you do it the right way or the wrong way, you're gonna figure out how to get affirmed, right? Whether you're going to do it in a manipulative way or you're going to do it in a very productive way. It became how you seen the world and how you found identity through who you are, right?
Mhm.
And then another book, most recently in 2020, I graduated from one of the, a really great program in the city around Black leaders, the Urban Leadership Foundation, and I was introduced to a book called Bling that was written by a man named Andy Seth. He is an Indian brother in the States, and he wrote this book that really institute the old Eastern practice of meditation.
Ah, okay.
And meditation has been around for a long time, and you can, it's in scripture, right? Meditate on my word day and night. And you can find that as a historical practice in our culture too. And so to be able to practice meditation and mindfulness, right,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
um, will help us just to be that much more intentional about who we are and how we show up.
It's just so, when you start thinking about what possibilities are if we're willing to engage, and there's,
Yeah,
when I think, and I keep jumping back into the financial part, and there's got to
yeah,
be a willingness
hmm,
for people, to pay for and engage in, personal development. It's got
yeah,
to be part of a budget,
yeah,
because without, we're in this information age where there's so much information thrown at us, and there's so many ways to find misinformation. There's so many ways to spend your time scrolling and, looking at, videos that have nothing to do with improvement or are
yeah,
growing or being, and we spend hours and hours. If you think of your day and how much time you spend at work, and then you come
hmm,
home and you watch TV and you watch somebody else's dream play out and you watch all these other things, and then you say, okay, I want to give back to community. Well, what do you have to give? You have to
hmm,
give if all you've done is meditate and dwell on all these things that are irrelevant to us existing and having better lives, then
yeah,
all you have to give is a whole bunch more of the same.
right,
And there's times to play. And so, oh man, I hate that we're at the top of the hour. We're at our end, and we're gonna do this again because this has been so impactful and so insightful. And I hope people are listening. And the Journey to Freedom program is. Uh, I've said this a few times, and I will say it often: is not so that I can be the smartest man in the room.
yeah,
It's so that we can develop community, and I can have people like Johnel on and Cornelius and some of these other guests that I have on, that we can bring you into different levels. The one level that I would suggest, and to click on that, is just a daily 7 minute uh, you know um, subscription to a mindset, setting the mindset, I guess,
yeah,
is what I would call it. The other thing is for those who are ready to do this journey, we're going to do a 12-week program, and we're going to do a 12-week intensive talk about all these 5 pillars. I would encourage you to find out more information. We'll have some links below that will be able to do that. Listen to these podcasts. These podcasts are going to come out at least once a week, if not twice a week. And I would listen to every single one of them, not because we're saying a whole bunch of things that have never been heard before. We're just putting it in a way and in a context that can help you, as a consumer, as the person who's wanting to grow, to get better faster,
yeah,
and to learn more and to be part of community. And my ultimate, I guess, belief was, if I only lived to 72 and it's 12 years, but in the 12 years that we do this, that we've created communities that are not only organic, but have the ability to continue to grow and to continue to thrive and continue to change the narrative. That I think, I love some of the things like, Dr. Martin Luther King. We just finished this month, and what he had to do with the marches and to bring people together. And he did his part, and he did well. But I don't know if this is the time to do that now. I don't think we're in this flux where we have to march in order to be heard. I think we can do it from within. We can do it from,
Mm,
the demands that we're able to make, because we are whole beings that have emotional intelligence, that are not just taking, this rough thing, but we're saying, okay, we're going to use what we've learned, the intelligence that we have, the
yeah.
opportunities that are available to us, and we're going to change a generation. We're going to change your mind. So again, John, I'm going to give you a second to just, I'll let you close out with whatever your final thoughts are. Like I said, I just appreciate you being on. And then, like I said, we're going to come back and do this again. This is the first or the last time. It is the first time, but it is not the last time that we are going to engage in a conversation like this.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you having me on and being able to have this conversation, much needed in our community. I would say the thing that we're striving for is liberation as Black men. And in order to have liberation, we have to, one, feel empowered, and we have to have opportunity. And I think that's what J2F is creating for us. And so I would implore you, Black men, that if you're listening to this podcast, tap in, because we want liberation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, Johnel is going to be helping teach a lot of the intelligence and the trauma and the health portion of our courses that we're going to do. So again, thank you. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Tell somebody else about this. If whoever you are that's listening to this, you say, hey, I'm not ready for this yet, but somebody is. And so just make sure that they know that this is available, and then you just continue to listen, continue to engage, and we will continue to just provide you with whatever we possibly can, whatever God is showing us, to make sure that you have in your life, so that you can be the best you can be, and then you can live our best life. So you guys have a wonderful, awesome, incredible day. Hey, you're God's greatest gift. We love you, and we will talk with you soon.